चलो अच्छा ये बताओ, लास्ट क्लास में हमने क्या डिस्कस किया था? क्वेश्चन पेपर। अच्छा, फेडरलिज्म में क्या डिस्कस किया था? कॉम्पिटिटिव फेडरलिज्म समझ में आया था? कोऑपरेटिव एंड कॉम्पिटिटिव। हेलो तमन्ना, शैली, संस्कृति, मुस्कान, दीपिका, am I audible? So let's do confrontation and then we'll move on. We will see another model of federalism. Confrontation model of federalism. As I told you that the party, the nature of coalition government, the nature of party system has changed over the period of time. And we have seen in the last decade, basically, the one party has come to power after a long time, right? Since in after 30 years, a party has secured majority in the Lok Sabha, that is the BJP. Now, the party in power at the center often comes with comes you know comes in conflict with the central government, right? On several issues, right? So the central government had what central government did? Central government has encroached upon, right, the authority of the state itself, the lawmaking power of the state itself. For example, let me give you example. The farms law, the three farms law in 2020. Now, agriculture is a subject of the state, but who formed it? Who framed the law? The central government, right? Similarly, I had given you example that look at education is in concurrent list, right? Now, earlier, if you look at, there was also central level of medical education, and state was also used to held examination for inducting the students for the medical education. Now look at the center actually devised NEET, right, for the medical examination, and it basically allowed all the inclusion in medical science through the NEET. Now look at the state protested, especially Tamil Nadu protested against the NEET examination, right? It is the imposition of the one model, right? The one uniform model in the one state. Now, thirdly, I'd given you example of GNCTD Act 2021 and GNCTD Act 2023. Now, this two law basically reduced the power of the elected government of Delhi, right? And Delhi government basically reacted to it. Okay? So look at the confrontational model of federalism that evolved in the last one decade. Got the idea? Now it is a contrast to the what we read here, the cooperative federalism. In cooperative federalism, we saw the cooperation between center and states on several issues. Here we see that the confrontation between center and state, right? Now let me give you another example if of abolition of Article 370. Now it was a unilateral, right? Unilaterally, the central government, damaged the autonomy of the state. Got the idea? So this is called, and the state actually did not, of course, the state has no such power juridically, but politically did not accept. Not juridically, right? Not constitutionally, but politically it did not accept, right? So confrontation model of federalism is in contrast to the cooperative model of federalism. Got the idea? Samay Maya? Making sense? Confrontational model of federalism, right? It is a model. So look at the in the recent decade, this cooperative and competitive turn to the confrontational model of federalism, right? Okay? And confrontation you can see between the party in power, that is NDA, the party in power at the center, and the basically the party in power in several states, but which is not BJP. The different. It may be TMC in West Bengal, or it may be DMK in Tamil Nadu, right? Or it may be National Conference or PDP in Kashmir, or it may be another party, for example, Congress party in Telangana. Now, governor is also playing very important role in this confrontation, right? So I had given you several example, right? कौन सा? एक तो farm law है, right? Second, I had given you example of NEET examination, that government has imposed a uniform model of medical examination. Third, I had given you example of GNCTD Act, GNCTD Act 2021. Now, what is GNCTD Act 2021? It says that government of Delhi means lieutenant governor. Now, look at the lieutenant governor is not a elected body, elected person. It is appointed by the union government, right? Isn't it? Right? So basically, the power of the state government reduced. Now, further you have GNCTD Act 2023, which further reduced the power of the Delhi government, right? And the Delhi government protested against it, right? Then I had given you example of, the governor role of governor, role of governor, right? That has become one of the controversy in Indian politics between center and the state. Look at the governor of Tamil Nadu, right? He was sitting on more than 23 bills. Okay? Now the central government used the office of governor to tame the elected government of the state. Right? Whether in case of Delhi or whether in case of Tamil Nadu or whether in the case of West Bengal or Kerala. Right? That is called confrontational model of federalism, and it is a very much contrast with the cooperative federalism. Right? As government has the official position. If you look at our official position is cooperative and competitive. Competitive means the positive competition that we discussed in the last class. The cooperative model of federalism and the competitive model of federalism. But if you look at the confrontational is just opposite, right? In contrast to the cooperative model of federalism. See, we inherited basically the colonial administration. Now, if you look at many scholar, Rajesh N. Gupta has written a constitution, a book in 2023, and the title of the book was Colonial Constitution. What he made an argument that look, Indian constitution is a purely colonial one. Now look at the tendency in colonial government. What was the tendency in during the colonial government, right? The tendency was centralization, very much centralization. That tendency we inherits. Now look at what was the aspirations of the people. What was the aspirations of the state? Autonomy. Autonomy. तो conflict तो होगा, conflict तो होगा. But look at this, conflict has been resolved by the constitution, right? The constituent assembly talked about, right? However, if you look at the Indian constitution is very much biased toward the center, right? Even though the state does not respect the autonomy of the state, even that autonomy was granted by the constitution, it is being infringed upon. Got the idea? ये है. इसको लिखिए तो जरा, just note it down. समझ में आए? Confrontational model of federalism. Now write it. देखिए, confrontation model of federalism confrontational model of federalism implies confrontational model of federalism implies confrontation between the center and state. Confrontational model of federalism implies confrontation between central state, center and state, as the center does not respect, as the center does not respect, as the center does not respect the constitutional power of the state. The constitutional power of the state. The constitutional power of the state. Now change the point and write, in contrast to cooperative federalism, in contrast to the cooperative federalism, confrontational model provokes, confrontational model provokes conflict between the center and state. Provokes conflict between center and state. Okay. For example, the Farm Law 2020, the Farm Law 2020 was passed by the center. The Farm Law 2020 was passed by the center. There was three farm law, right? And farm law was basically, it allowed the corporate to procure, right? Procure the farm's produce as their wish, right? So it allowed monopoly of capitalism, you can say, right? ठीक है? Now law has been abolished. Farm law 2020 had been passed by the center, but state opposed. Now second, you write, okay, the central government, the central government, the central government provided NEET examination. The central government provided NEET examination, but Tamil Nadu opposed it. Tamil Nadu opposed it. The central government passed GNCDT Act 2021 and GNCDT Act 2023. The central government passed GNCDT Act 2021 and GNCDT Act 2023. in order to curb the power of Delhi government. In order to curb the power of the Delhi government. Can they be challenged? Of course. Can they be challenged? They are in there basically. Curb the power of the Delhi government. Now, next you write, in recent decade, the role of governor has become very controversial. In recent decade, the role of governor has become very controversial. The role of governor has become very controversial, especially in non-BJP ruled state, especially in non-BJP ruled state like Tamil Nadu, like Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, West Bengal, Kerala, Kerala, Telangana, and so on. अच्छा, एक और एग्जांपल है. Look at the ED. पता है ये इंस्टीट्यूशन ED, Enforcement Directorate. So what it does? It arrest. किसको? मिनिस्टर को भी अरेस्ट कर लेता है. राइट? अच्छा, लॉ कौन है इनके पास? इनके पास लॉ कौन है? ये चीफ मिनिस्टर को भी अरेस्ट कर लेते हैं. Have you seen such arrest? Right? Now it is a control. This is very much model of confrontation. Look at the CBI, which has been used in Indian politics. That has given the basically confrontation between the central state. So note it down. Okay. The use of central agency like ED and CBI, the use of central agency like ED and CBI provoked conflict between central state. Provoked conflict between center and state. That's enough. The confrontational model of federalism. समझ में आया? What is confrontational model of federalism? Right? It is a model of federalism in contrast to cooperative federalism. In cooperative federalism, both center state cooperate, right? In here, both the center state comes into conflict. Yeah, both oppose each other. Both oppose each other. That is confrontational model of federalism. Now let me talk about the another model of federalism. अच्छा, एक चीज और बता देता हूं यहीं पर. जब हम कहते हैं coercive model of federalism, right? एक टर्म यूज होता है, अगर आपके पास आ जाए, जैसे मैंने आपको कोऑपरेटिव फेडरलिज्म बताया था, तो आपको एक टर्म बताया था, that is collaborative model of federalism. What is collaborative model of federalism? I told you that collaborative model of federalism is the term is coined by the Supreme Court. While Supreme Court was adjudicating the conflict between Delhi and the Union government, right? And it's argued that both the center and state should be agree or ready to collaborate each other, right? To reflect collaborative federalism rather than confrontational model of federalism, right? तो जब हम coercive federalism की बात करते हैं, coercive model of federalism. What is coercive model of federalism? coercive model of federalism is a model of federalism where the union government unilaterally impose its decision, right? Unilaterally, encroached upon the authority of the state. Now look at for example, abolition of Article 370 is a one example of coercive model, right? Or GNCDD Act 2021 and 2023 is a coercive model. Or even the uniform pattern of the NEET examination is also a kind of coercion, right? It is an imposition by the central government on the state कि भाई देखो हमारा मॉडल है, आपको एक्सेप्ट करना पड़ेगा. Whether you agree or don't agree doesn't matter. You have to accept.
Sir, sir, this after this NEET exam, cannot the states have their own medical colleges and
They
exams?
have their own medical college, but the examination cannot be conducted by the state. There is only examination which select students in order to get admission, whether it is a central medical institution or whether it is a state medical institution. Priyansh.
Okay, sir.
इससे ही वही लाना पड़ेगा, right? And NEET is basically all India test. समझ में आया? ठीक है, ठीक है. अच्छा, एक पोर्शन मैंने अभी एग्जांपल दिया, एक स्कीम निकाल दिया, वीवी जी राम जी, भाई 40% पैसा देना पड़ेगा. sometimes central government unilaterally declare, भाइयों बहनों ये स्कीम है. Now, without consulting state, how can you declare something, right, where state is also party? For example, how can declare something on behalf of you, right? Once if I'm planning to declare something about you, then I have to take your consent. नहीं कि भाई ऐसा ऐसा बात है, अच्छा बताइए आप लोग क्या करें हम लोग, right? And then I can declare something, isn't it? So look at this, declaration of centrally sponsored schemes where the state is a part. स्कीम में उनको पैसा देना है 40%, देगा कहां से देगा? What idea? So that is a coercive model of federalism, and coercive and confrontation means similarity. समझ में आया, राइट? तो इसीलिए मैंने थोड़ा कोर्सिव मॉडल ऑफ फेडरलिज्म बता दिया, राइट? ये चीज कहीं अगर मिले तो मतलब घबरा नहीं जाना कि यार क्या आ गया फेडरलिज्म में. समझ में आया? कोर्स दे आर सेम लग नहीं रहा सेम, दे आर सेम सेम. होता है किसी का नाम रघु और किसी का नाम राघव, उसी इंसान का उसी का कुछ और नाम होता है, होते हैं भाई. What idea? Right? So when you say confrontation, then फिर स्टेट का है थोड़ा अंतर है. आप बोलोगे कि कंप्लीट अंतर, तो दो टर्म क्यों है, राइट? दो टर्म क्यों है? दो वर्ड होते हैं इंग्लिश में, सिनोनिम्स होते हैं, बट लेट मी टेल यू दोनों में थोड़ा डिफरेंस होता है. तो यहाँ पर थोड़ा डिफरेंस है. यहाँ पर सेंटर एंड स्टेट के बीच में कॉन्फ्रंटेशन तो है, राइट? सेंटर स्टेट तो है, राइट? बट यहाँ पर ठीक है, स्टेट अपोज कर सकता है, राइट? इट इज ए कॉन्फ्लिक्ट. यहाँ पर क्या है, स्टेट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का जो चांस है ना वो कम है. स्टेट हैज टू ओबे द कमांड ऑफ द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट. यहाँ पर कोवर्सिव यूज, व्हाट आइडिया? उतना ही अंतर है. Now let me move to the another that is called asymmetric model of federalism. आप खुद से कोर्सिव मॉडल में दो लाइन लिख लो, जो भी आपको समझ में आता है. बाद में पता चला, दो लाइन लिख लो, whatever you think, whatever you understood. एक दो एग्जाम्पल लिख लो, ताकि आपके हिसाब किताब में रहे कि यस perceived model of federalism is this. Shashi Tharoor talks about this. Now, Shashi Tharoor uses this word rather than confrontation. ठीक है, but तो Shashi Tharoor is a basically a leader in opposition, right? जो अगर मान लो कि वहीं पर कोई स्टेट का आदमी है, तो वो ये वर्ड यूज करेगा rather than ये, ठीक है? एक दो एग्जांपल लिख लीजिए, क्या लिखा है? एबोलिशन ऑफ आर्टिकल 370. It was a unilateral decision. Then GNCTD Act 2021 and GNCTD Act 2023. Now come to asymmetric model of federalism. Now if you look at, let me give you two models of, one is US and Australia, right? Another example is India and Canada, for example, जो पॉपुलर है आपकी, राइट? और बेल्जियम भी ले सकते हो, स्पेन भी ले सकते हो, राइट? बट उतना नहीं जानना, जितना आप किताब में देख लेते हो उतना बहुत है. हमको कंपैरेटिव पॉलिटिक्स नहीं पढ़ा रहा हूँ. सो लुक एट दिस इज symmetric model of federalism. Symmetric model of federalism means the relations between the center and its constituent units are similar, same. For example, if you look at the US, so in US there is a state, right? So each constituent unit is called a state. Now come to India, each constituent unit is not a state. There are states, there are UTs. Even though there is no similarity in UTs, few UTs have legislative assembly and few don't have, right? The one legislative assembly or two have their own Supreme Court, right? जो उनके के पास भी अपना सुप्रीम कोर्ट नहीं, हाई कोर्ट, सॉरी, हाई कोर्ट, दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट है और वहां पर हाई कोर्ट है, राइट? और यूटीसी के पास हाई कोर्ट ही नहीं है, ठीक है? इवन द स्टेट्स, लुक एट द स्टेट्स, they are not similar, they are very different, है ना? For example, look at the few states that fifth schedule, sixth schedule, राइट? सो अब देखेंगे कि यहाँ पर थोड़ा असिमेट्री है. इस मॉडल में कनाडा एंड जो इंडिया का जो मॉडल है, दैट इज असिमेट्रिक मॉडल, वेयर एज यूएस एंड ऑस्ट्रेलिया इज कॉल्ड सिमेट्रिक मॉडल ऑफ फेडरलिज्म, राइट? अब ये एसिमेट्री आपको फाइनेंस में भी दिख सकता है. अभी मैंने स्कीम का नाम लिया तो मुझे स्कीम याद आ गया. आप देखेंगे कि जो स्कीम है, राइट, उस स्कीम में फॉर एग्जांपल वीवी जीराम जी का एक स्कीम ले लेते ना, राइट? बहुत चर्चा में है ये, राइट? अब इसमें क्या है कि the center will give 60% and states will give 40%. But it is not that all states will give 40%, right? The Himalayan states will give 90:10. So Himalayan states will give 10%. Now look at Delhi is a UT. Delhi will give 40% contribution, but Andaman and Nicobar will have no contribution. 100% fund will be given by the central government. Look at the asymmetry in terms of finance. Right? Now few states have high court. Now few states have high court but enjoined, the combined. For example, Goa and Maharashtra have single high court, or Haryana and Punjab has single high court, right? Joint high court. So such kind of asymmetry, look at Article 371. Right? Look at 370 has been already abolished, so we can't count that. But Article 371, right? It gives a special, you know, a special arrangement to the few states like Nagaland. Similarly, if you look at the fifth schedule, sixth schedule, right? So they're kind, yes, yes. Inner line permit, yes, inner line permit, very good example. Yeah, समझ में आ रहा है मतलब, right? So asymmetrical federalism is a just contrast to the symmetrical federalism, right? US and Australia are basically the example of symmetric model of federalism, whereas India and Canada both are model of asymmetric federalism. In asymmetric federalism, relations between the federal and its constituent units are very much asymmetric. The power relations are very asymmetric. Got the idea? समझ में आया? Right? समझ में आ गया ना सबको या नहीं आया तो बताओ मैं फिर से आई विल एक्सप्लेन अगेन. Yes, Tamanna, Shelly, online student Sanskriti and others. Did I make sense about asymmetric model of federalism? तो दो चार लाइन 10 लाइन लिखिए इसके बारे में. देखिए, asymmetric model of federalism implies asymmetric model of federalism implies different arrangement, different arrangement, different arrangement of the federal government with different states, with different states. Got the idea? Right? Now change the point and write it. In US and Canada, in US and Australia, this model. In US and Australia, the relations between the federal government, in US and Australia, the relationship between the federal government and its constituent units, ये जो अलग अलग स्टेट है ना इसको कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट यूनिट्स बोलते हैं, राइट? पॉलिटिकल साइंस के टर्म में the relationship between the federal government and its constituent units is symmetrical, whereas in the case of India and Canada, whereas in the case of India and Canada, whereas in the case of India and Canada, it is asymmetrical. Right? Now, change the point. Okay. In the US, Senate has symmetrical representation. In the US, Senate gives symmetrical representation. In the US, Senate matlab the upper house. The upper house in the US is called Senate. The Senate gives symmetrical representation. कितना है? दो है सबके लिए, हाँ? But the Rajya Sabha follow disparities. और disparities actually wrong send में use होता है, follows asymmetrical. For example, UP has 31 members. For example, UP has 31 members, whereas Goa has only one members in the Rajya Sabha. Okay? Now, change the point. In the US, all constituent units are same. In the US, all constituent units are same, whereas in India, there are states and UTs. In India, there are states and UTs. Even even all UTs have no similar status. Even all UTs have no similar status. Status. Okay. For example, Delhi, Puducherry, and JNK have legislative assembly. For example, Delhi, Puducherry, and JNK have legislative assembly, and others do not have. And others do not have. Now change the paragraph point. Like in the US, each constituent unit has its own Supreme Court. In the US, each constituent unit has each constituent unit has each constituent unit has its own Supreme Court. वहां पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट बोलते हैं, ऊपर वाले को फेडरल कोर्ट बोलते हैं. Each constituent unit has its own Supreme Court, but in India, each state has no separate High Court. Just give me 2 minutes. I'm coming back. Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm audible. So what have you written? क्या लिखा आपने? Supreme Court, but in India, each state has no. So, for example दे दीजिए. Punjab है, exactly. For example, Punjab and Haryana have only one high court, like Goa and Maharashtra. ठीक है. Now, next point you write. देखिए, the fifth and sixth schedule, the fifth and sixth schedule, the fifth and sixth schedule of the Constitution also apply asymmetrically. The fifth and sixth schedule of the Constitution also apply asymmetrically. Next point, Article 371. Article 371 gives a special powers and autonomy to the northeastern states. To the northeastern states. Okay. In financial dimension, in financial dimension, in financial dimension, there's a there's a dissimilarity. There's a dissimilarity of financial contribution. Of financial contribution. For example, for example, center and states share 40 is to 60 is to 40. Center and states share 40 is to 60, whereas center and Himalayan states share 90 is to 10. Whereas center and Himalayan states share funds 90 is to 10. Formula for their financial contribution. Formula for financial contribution. समझ में आया? आप देखेंगे कि यूटी जो है ना, यूटी विद लेजिस्लेचर फॉलो द सेम दिस मेथड, बट यूटी विदाउट लेजिस्लेचर फॉलो दिस. वहां पर 100% कौन स्पेंड करता है द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट. दैट इज आल्सो डिसिमिलैरिटी. देयरफॉर इंडियन फेडरलिज्म is a asymmetric model of federalism. Therefore, Indian federalism is asymmetric model of federalism. Therefore, Indian model of federalism is asymmetric model of federalism. Unlike the US and Australia. Unlike the US and Australia. Making sense about different model of federalism, right? ठीक है. हाँ हाँ बोलो बोलो. So look at the financial power. If you look at the US Federation, The federal government has no such, volume of power. The most of the power has been given to the state. So a state is responsible for the collection of the resources and also managing it, their own population. Got the idea? And the federal government has nothing to do with that. The center also generate revenue, but that power is very limited in the US also. That power is limited in order to bear the expenses of the federal agencies and government. What idea? ठीक है? India में क्या है कि if you look at the financial power, right, state has more responsibility, right, but less autonomy or less power in order to collect revenue. ठीक है? यूएस में ऐसा नहीं है, इट्स करस्पॉन्डिंग. हाउएवर इन द यूएस में थोड़ा सा ज्यादा है, थोड़ा सा रेवेन्यू सेंटर को ज्यादा आता है. इंडिया में आप देखेंगे सेंटर के पास बहुत ज्यादा रेवेन्यू जाता है, राइट, और इसीलिए रेवेन्यू का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन होता है हमारे यहाँ पर. हाउएवर यूएस गवर्नमेंट आल्सो गिव्स रेवेन्यू टू द स्टेट. No. It's Indian criteria. It's not. It's Indian criteria. I will talk about 15th Commission recommendation. Don't worry, right? So financial जब वो पढ़ाऊंगा तब I'll talk about the I'll talk about 14 12 से शुरू करूंगा, 10th से शुरू करूंगा. चलो 10th Finance Commission, 12th, then 14th, 13th नहीं, 14th and 15th. Now 16th has been already constituted. ठीक है? अगर मैं कुछ recommendation आया होगा then I'll put it. So that is a model of federalism that we discussed. Now let me talk about the center-state relations. Center-state relations in India. Now, if you look at center-state relations in India, can be divided into three types. Basically, the legislative relations, between the center and the state. ठीक है. दूसरा है एग्जीक्यूटिव रिलेशंस एंड तीसरा है फाइनेंशियल रिलेशन. Financial relations. Now, if you look at the basically relations, there are in three zones. We can divide the legislative relations between center and state. Legislative relations means the law-making relations, right? Law-making power, right? And if you look at today, we will concentrate our discussion on legislative relations between center and states. Okay? And then we will move to the administrative and financial relations, also called as physical federalism, right? But let's see financial relation between center and state. Now, legislative relations between center state is dealt by the part 11 of the Indian Constitution, and from article 245 to 255. 10 articles are devoted to explain the legislative relations between center and states, right? So सबसे पहली बात कि कौन से पार्ट में ये पार्ट है 11, ठीक है, और आर्टिकल कौन सा है, आर्टिकल 245 टू 255. इतना दिमाग में रहना चाहिए बस. अगर एक एक आर्टिकल समझ में आ रहा है, अगर आप उसको जितना आर्टिकल कैप्चर कर सको उतना अच्छा बढ़िया, राइट. So look at legislative relations between center state. The Constitution Part 11 from Article 245 to 255 basically talks about the lawmaking power, right, between the center and state. Got the idea? Now look at these relations, and we can see these relations in different uh, points. So first, for example, first we can see that the legislative extent, the law, the territorial extent of the center and the government. राइट टेरिटोरियल एक्सटेंट का मतलब है कि अगर सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट लॉ बनाएगी तो कितना दूर तक अप्लीकेबल होगा, अगर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट लॉ बनाएगी तो कितना दूर तक अप्लीकेबल होगा, यही इसका मतलब है टेरिटोरियल एक्सटेंट, राइट. सो टेरिटोरियल एक्सटेंट, ये इसका ही मतलब है, टेरिटोरियल एक्सटेंट, राइट, ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन. Come again. ठीक है. अगर आप देखते हैं, इफ यू सी कि जैसे उसने कहा कि जब मान लो कि पार्लियामेंट लॉ बनाता है, पार्लियामेंटरी लॉ, मैं ये लिख देता हूं पार्लियामेंट्री लॉ. पार्लियामेंट्री लॉ का मतलब क्या है? द लॉ मेड बाय द पार्लियामेंट, दैट इज कॉल्ड पार्लियामेंट्री लॉ. नाउ पार्लियामेंट्री लॉ शैल बी एप्लीकेबल ऑन अ पर्टिकुलर पार्ट ऑफ इंडियन टेरिटरी or the entire Indian territory or even abroad, right? The parliamentary law has extraterritorial impact. For example, if the parliament makes law related to citizenship, now it is applied to the all Indians who are living abroad. Got the idea? So look at the parliamentary law, and let me tell you, parliament can make law on the union list and the concurrent list. However, it can also make law on state list, but in different way. I'll come later on, right? So तो पहले की बात है कि the parliament can make law, right, and that law shall be applicable in all states of India, including the people who are living abroad. समझ में आया? Right? Now if you look at, समझ लीजिए, फिर उसके बाद लिखेंगे हम लोग, थोड़ा सा डिक्टेशन बाद में करेंगे. Now state government or state law. Now state law is applicable in that state only. For example, the UP, assembly makes a law, for example, that shall be applicable in UP only. समझ में आया? Right? That is called, right? So UP has no extra territorial impact. अगर यूपी कोई कानून बनाती है तो वो कानून कहां पे अप्लाई होगा? आवाज आ रही है आप लोगों को? में इतना ज्यादा घबरा हो जाता है ना. या I'm audible to everyone. ध्यान रखना पड़ता है भाई. ऑल ऑफ, हाँ, राइट. पहले था कि जो लोग हैं इधर ही है, उन्हीं को समझाना है. अब कुछ लोग हैं जो मुझे देख रहे हैं, मुझे सुन रहे हैं, मैं ना सुन सकता हूं उनको, ना देख सकता हूं. हाँ, सुन सकता हूं बट फिजिकली तो नहीं सुन सकते ना, ऑफ कोर्स फोन पे, मतलब इस पे साउंड पे, लाइक रेडियो जॉकी. हाँ, प्रियांश इज क्वाइट एक्टिव एंड दैट्स गुड. ही शुड बी एक्टिव, एवरीवन शुड बी एक्टिव, राइट? एक्टिव पार्टिसिपेशन इज गुड वन. ठीक है. सो स्टेट लॉ क्या है कि स्टेट लॉ इज एप्लीकेबल इन दैट पर्टिकुलर स्टेट ओनली, एक्सेप्ट इन वन केस. और वो केस है दैट इज कॉल्ड डॉक्ट्राइन ऑफ टेरिटोरियल नेक्सस. इसका मतलब क्या होता है कि मान लीजिए कि कोई यूपी में कुछ लॉ है और यूपी में कुछ कंडक्ट हो रहा है उसका एक्सटेंशन एमपी में भी है, राइट? तो जो यूपी का जो लॉ है दैट विल बी अप्लीकेबल टू दिस कंडक्ट ऑफ द यूपी एंड देयर एक्सटेंशन इन द एमपी। समझ में आ रहा है, राइट? दूसरा एग्जांपल देता हूं इसका। मान लीजिए कोई क्राइम कर लिया है यूपी में और भाग गया है एमपी में, पकड़ के लाएंगे यूपी उसको, राइट? दैट लॉ शैल बी एप्लीकेबल दैट पर्सन, वो एमपी भाग जाए या बिहार भाग जाए। हाँ, देश छोड़ के चला जाए तब तो कोई बात ही नहीं है, राइट? अदरवाइज वहां पर भी अप्लाई होता है। यू हैव इंडियन गवर्नमेंट हैज एग्रीमेंट ऑफ एक्स्ट्राडिशन, वो लॉ अप्लाई होता है, राइट? जैसे किसी ने सवाल पूछा कि भाई शादी कर लेगा, एक दिन नहीं पूछा था, लॉ प्रयास नहीं पूछा था कि मान लीजिए कि शादी कर लिया यहाँ पर, नाबालिग है, और चले गए हम कहां पर, सऊदी अरबिया, ठीक है? तो क्या वो अप्लीकेबल होगा? होगा, तो लॉ अप्लीकेबल होगा।
सर आई हैड आस्क्ड के सऊदी अरबिया जाके अगर वो चाइल्ड मैरिज करता है तो
वहां पर भी कर लेता, हाँ, तो भी होगा, क्योंकि उसका डायरेक्ट नेक्सस है ना, वो इंसान यूपी का है एंड वो लॉ अप्लाई होगा उसके ऊपर, वो चाहे सऊदी अरबिया में रहे चाहे स्विट्जरलैंड में रहे, डजंट मैटर। गॉट आइडिया? सो ये है टेरिटोरियल एक्सटेंट ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन। समझ में है? ये एक कंपोनेंट है लेजिस्लेटिव रिलेशंस का। देयर आर मेनी कंपोनेंट, राइट? विल टॉक अबाउट 4 कंपोनेंट एट लीस्ट। समझ में आया? राइट? जरा इसको लिखिए तो, जरा इसका इंट्रोडक्शन लिखिए, लिखिए। द पार्ट 11, the part 11 and article 245 to 255, part 11 and article 245 to 255 deals with legislative relations between the center and state. Part 11 and article 245 to 255 deals with legislative relations between center and states. It has several dimensions. It has several dimensions. पहला लिखिए, the territorial extent of the legislation. The territorial extent of the legislation. Territorial extent of the legislation. इसमें डिवाइड लिखिए, पार्लियामेंट्री लॉ। देखिए, the law made by the union government shall be applicable the law made by the union government shall be applicable for the whole or any part of the territory. The law made by the union government shall be applicable for the whole or any part of the territory of India. समझ में आया? थोड़ा सा एक और लिखिए, further the union law is also applicable to Indian citizen. The union law is also applicable Indian citizens and their property, the union law is also applicable on Indian citizens and their property living in abroad, living in foreign countries, living in foreign countries. अच्छा, इसका नाम बोला जाता है एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल लेजिस्लेशन, राइट? देखिए, इट इज कॉल्ड एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल लेजिस्लेशन, कंफ्यूजन नहीं होना. इट इज कॉल्ड एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल लेजिस्लेशन. एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल लेजिस्लेशन, इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब है द पार्लियामेंट अलोन हैज एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल लेजिस्लेशन. What the idea? Now, write state law. Write state law. The law made by a state legislature is applicable the law made by a state legislature is applicable within the state, except there is a sufficient nexus, until there is a sufficient nexus between the state and the object. And the object, state हो गया यहाँ पर subject, और जो वो है object, right? Between the state and the object. ठीक है, समझ में आया क्या आया? कि यूनियन लॉ इज अप्लीकेबल डिपेंड्स ऑन लॉ. अगर मान लीजिए यूनियन गवर्नमेंट ने लॉ बनाया है मणिपुर के लिए, तो मणिपुर में अप्लीकेबल होगा. बट इफ द लॉ इज फॉर द एंटायर इंडिया, देन इट विल बी अप्लीकेबल टू एंटायर इंडिया. एंटायर इंडिया इंक्लूड्स ऑल स्टेट्स, यूटीज. ठीक है, कोई भी अगर हमने टेरिटरी एक्वायर किया है वो भी आता है इसके अंदर, राइट? Further, the union law has extraterritorial legislation. It means, what does it mean? The union law is applicable beyond Indian territory on Indian citizens living abroad, right? समझ में आया? Now look at the state law. State law is applicable within the state, right? Until and unless there is a sufficient nexus between the state and the object. ठीक है, समझ में आया? इसको कहते हैं डॉक्ट्राइन ऑफ टेरिटोरियल नेक्सस. लिखिए, इट इज नोन एज डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ टेरिटोरियल नेक्सस. इट इज नोन एज डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ टेरिटोरियल नेक्सस. इट इज कॉल्ड एज डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ टेरिटोरियल नेक्सस. समझ में आया? अच्छा, तो ये दो है. अब हमारे पास यूटीज भी है, राइट? अब यूटीज के लिए क्या होगा? यूटी के लिए कौन कानून बनाएगा? सेंटर, राइट? तो ये लॉ है. लॉ मतलब आर्टिकल 13. लॉ मीन्स, लॉ कभी भी दिमाग में आए सीधा आर्टिकल 13. व्हाट इज लॉ? आर्टिकल 13 को दिमाग में रखना है. इसलिए आर्टिकल थोड़ा सा आपको हेल्प करता है चीजें को क्लेरिफाई करने के लिए. इसीलिए आर्टिकल थोड़ा सा, ऑफ कोर्स थोड़ा सा टफ टास्क है. और इतने सारे आर्टिकल्स हैं, बट इतने सारे आर्टिकल्स हमें याद रखने नहीं है. शुरू 1 से लेके 51 तक जरूर याद रखिए, ठीक है। उसके बाद सेलेक्टिव आर्टिकल्स हैं जो हमें याद रखने हैं, राइट। और बार बार आप रिवीजन करेंगे तो अपने आप याद हो जाएंगे, याद करने की जरूरत नहीं होती है, राइट। जब आप लॉ करते हैं तो आपसे एक्सपेक्टेशन किया जाता है कि एज मच एज यू कैन, राइट, इफ यू कैन memorize or remember all articles of the Indian Constitution, you're the best, you know, lawyer, you're an expert on constitution, नहीं, बेसिकली माना जाता है। और उसके सारे डायमेंशंस आपको याद रखने हैं, यही तो है कानून में है क्या है। बट हमारे एग्जाम पर्पज से हमें सारे आर्टिकल याद नहीं रखने हैं, वी हैव टू यू नो कीप सम आर्टिकल इन आवर माइंड। अच्छा, यूटीसी में बारे में लिखिए, देखिए द यूनियन गवर्नमेंट, द यूनियन गवर्नमेंट the union government makes law for UTs. तो ये एक डायमेंशन हो गया टेरिटोरियल एक्सटेंट ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन का। सेकंड होता है, जो सेकंड डायमेंशन है, इट इज अबाउट द डिस्ट्रीब्यूट पावर कितना है। ये तो लॉ बनाए हमने, ये बात किया है कि पार्लियामेंट कैन मेक लॉ, स्टेट कैन मेक लॉ, राइट, द प्रेसिडेंट कैन प्रॉब्लम मेक द लॉ फॉर द यूटी। यहाँ पर प्रेसिडेंट यूज होता है, राइट, बट प्रेसिडेंट इज अ नॉमिनल फिगर हेड, सेरेमोनियल फिगर हेड, इट इज डन बाय द यूनियन गवर्नमेंट। एंड अगर आप कहते हैं यूनियन गवर्नमेंट इज हेडेड बाय द प्रेसिडेंट, राइट। सारा काम इंडिया में कुछ भी काम होता है ना, इट इज ऑन द नेम ऑफ द प्रेसिडेंट। कुछ भी काम होता है प्रेसिडेंट के नाम पे होता है, राइट, और प्रेसिडेंट के अंदर ही सब है। However, the real power is vested in the prime minister, right? Head of the government, yes, head of the government, right? दूसरा है कि भाई ये जो legislative subjects क्या है? So basically, second is distribution of legislative subjects. Distribution of legislative subjects. Distribution of legislative subjects. Now look at the seventh schedule. समझिए इसको, कुछ लिखना भी नहीं है। If you look at seventh schedule, is one of the pillar of in India's federalism, right? And seventh schedule has three lists, right? That is one called list one, and list one basically, you know, consists approximately 100 items, right? On which the central government, the union legislature can make law, right? Now state government cannot make law on the list included in the list one, right? So item कितना है हमारे, subjects कितने हैं, total subjects, right? Approximately 100 है, ठीक है। दूसरा है हमारे पास, that is called list two, और list two that is called state list, इसी को state list कहते हैं। और ये जो वाला है पहला, इसको बोलते हैं यूनियन लिस्ट। अच्छा, स्टेट लिस्ट में कितने आइटम्स है टोटल? 61 आइटम्स है, राइट। पहले 66 आइटम्स थे, राइट। अर्लियर देयर वाज 66 आइटम्स। अर्लियर देयर वाज 66 आइटम्स। अच्छा, तो भाई 5 आइटम क्या हुआ? 5 आइटम क्या हुआ? इट वाज ट्रांसफर्ड from the state list to the concurrent list by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, ठीक है। Now अब state list में 61 आइटम्स है। अब इस 61 आइटम्स में, राइट, हर सब्जेक्ट पे कौन कानून बना सकता है? the state can make law on any items included in the state. ठीक है? For example, look at law and order. ठीक है? या for example police, right? या liquor. Liquor is one of the major source, revenue source of state. ठीक है? Agriculture, right? And so on and so forth. ठीक है? तीसरा हमारे पास है लिस्ट, that is called list 3, and that is called concurrent list. Concurrent list. Now it has total number of items, that is called 52 items. Right? Earlier there was a 47. Earlier, no, 47. So if you look at the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, right, basically transferred 5 items, right, from the state list to the concurrent list. That is a distribution of the list. Okay? So on the union list, the union government can make law. On the state list, the state government can make law. On items included in the concurrent list, right, both the government can make law. Okay? If there is a conflict between the central state regarding the law, the central law shall prevail. The central law shall prevail. Making sense? मान लो कोई ऐसा item है which is not part of list 1, list 2 and list 3, then what about that? Yeah, it is called residuary item. इसको कहते हैं residuary item. The items which does not fall either in the list 1 or the list 2 or the list 3. That is called residuary item. Like OTT, over the top. Right? जितने भी Netflix, Amazon Prime आप जो देखते हैं, G5 और G5 ही नाम है ना, right? All are basically, residuary. OTT is basically residuary item on which the union government can make law. US में देखेंगे, US में the state government has power to make law on residuary item. But in India, the union government has power to make law on residuary item. Right? That is called distribution of the legislative power. What idea? Note it down. G. What about UTs? See, UTs is governed by the central government through the president governs the UTs, right? And they don't have such list. ठीक है? जो भी काम होता है वो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट गवर्न करती है. ही नहीं ना. अच्छा, लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली है, जिसके पास लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली है उसके पास वहां पर भी डिफरेंस है. फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर आप देखेंगे कि दिल्ली इज गवर्न्ड बाय 269 AB. तो दिल्ली के पास क्या है? दिल्ली के पास क्या है कि दिल्ली के पास लैंड, लॉ एंड ऑर्डर और पुलिस, इसको लेकर के पावर नहीं है. एक्सेप्ट ऑल द मैटर्स लाइक दिल्ली कैन गवर्न. अगर आप जाओगे पुडुचेरी में द स्टेट गवर्नमेंट हैज अथॉरिटी ऑन पुलिस आल्सो, लैंड आल्सो. ठीक है? तो यहाँ पर अलग हो जाता है. नाउ इफ यू कम टू जम्मू एंड कश्मीर, they are like Puducherry. समझ में? Right? Delhi as a UT is neither UT sometimes and it is not a state sometimes. Right? Delhi is a very peculiar. Right? Delhi is a very peculiar. Right? Delhi government has no authority on land, police and law. What idea? So would you write few line? लिखिए तो जरा. Distribution of legislative subjects में. Okay, seventh schedule of the Constitution 7th schedule of the constitution and article 246 and article 246, ये ऊपर जो मैंने बात किया ना, ये आर्टिकल 245 है जो बेसिकली मैंने मिटा दिया। टेरिटोरियल की बात कर रहा था कि भाई ये आर्टिकल 245 था, राइट। और आर्टिकल 245 था कि भाई टेरिटोरियल एक्शन देख लो कि स्टेट लॉ शैल बी एप्लीकेबल इन स्टेट, सेंट्रल लॉ शैल बी एप्लीकेबल इन सेंटर एंड आल्सो अदर कंट्री, राइट। सो क्या लिखा? The seventh schedule and article 246 provides threefold distribution of legislative subjects, provides threefold distribution of provides threefold distribution of legislative subjects, namely list 1। आज आपको जाकर काम करना है, ये बेयर एक्ट उठाना है और लिस्ट 1 पे थोड़ा कड़ी नजर डालना है, ठीक है। अच्छा, कड़ी नजर में क्या नजर डालना है बोलोगे? जो चीज कंफर्म हो कि भाई सेंटर का होगा ही होगा, या फॉरेन पॉलिसी स्टेट तो गवर्न नहीं करेगा, आपको फोकस यहां करना है। कुछ चीजें ऐसी है कि कंफ्यूजन ना हो कि भाई यहां पर भी होगा या यहां पर होगा, वो चीजें आपको देखनी है, राइट। अदरवाइज आप थोड़ा 100 लिस्ट को देखिए क्या क्या है वहां पर आज, और ये तीनों लिस्ट आप थोड़ा सा घर पे बैठ के उसको घूरिए, घूरिए समझते हैं, स्टेयरिंग, राइट। देखो उसको क्या क्या है, अच्छा ये है, अच्छा ये है, लुक एट इट, अच्छा ये है, ठीक है। इफ यू कंपेयर द थ्री बेस्ट, क्या लिखा? legislative subjects, right? Namely, list 1, namely, list 1, it consists 100 items, it consists 100 items like defense, foreign affairs, currency. It consists 100 items like defense, foreign affairs, currency, atomic energy, insurance, census. Census is very important. That is sort of a terminology different, but both are same. Census, right? Census, audit, audit, interstate trade, interstate trade, interstate trade. Okay. The parliament has exclusive power to make law. The parliament has exclusive power to make law on every item included in. The parliament has exclusive power to make law enumerated in, word ये जो होता है मैं वही word enumerated in the list 1. Enumerate मतलब होता है include कर, enumerated in the list 1. Enumerated in, enumerated वह वर्ड लिखा रहेगा, इसलिए मैं वर्ड यूज कर रहा हूं, है ना। Enumerated in the list 1. Now second you write the list 2. The list 2, which includes 61 subjects, which includes 61 subjects, bracket में लिखिए earlier 61 items, 60, which includes 61 subjects ब्रैकेट में लिख लीजिएगा अर्लियर 66 सब्जेक्ट्स, ब्रैकेट क्लोज। कितने बेसिक क्लास है आपका? 12-10 से मैं छोड़ दूं क्योंकि 10 मिनट तो आपको ब्रेक चाहिए ना, राइट? और अच्छा नहीं लगता कि मैं किसी के क्लास में एनक्रोच करूं, राइट? So we will initiate from here only tomorrow, right? And we will see the further development, right? The further things in federalism. So let me stop here only, right? मैंने सोचा कि इसको खत्म कर लेते हैं, but टाइम लग जाएगा, 5-7 मिनट तो आराम से लग जाएंगे। वो बात एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिलेशंस है। So I'll stop here. Tamanna, Shelly, Sanskriti, Ojashwi, Muskan, Frodin, Chiu.